The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus put before the crowds another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it is grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has. No, on finding that one pearl, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that is thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all this? They answered, yes. And he said to them, therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of the household, who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Parables are a bit like riddles. They engage our minds trying to seek understanding. But unlike a riddle that often has a correct answer, I don't think we ever fully understand them. They function more like a Zen Buddhism koan, a story or saying that a master gives the student to ponder. It could mean this, or it could mean that. And as one ponders potential meanings and new ways of seeing and understanding oneself and the world around us often emerge. Here's an example of a typical Zen koan story that functions, I think, a bit like one of Jesus' parables. 2 men were arguing about a flag flapping in the wind. It's the wind that is really moving, states the first one. No, it's the flag that is moving, contends the second. A Zen master who happened to be walking by overhears their debate and interrupts them, saying, neither the flag nor the wind is moving. It is the mind that moves. Jesus' parables in our gospel today can get our minds moving in some new ways, as we hear 5 of them illuminating different aspects of this kingdom of heaven. The first 2 were addressed to the crowds, and the second 3 to his disciples. Together they function like a diamond with many facets of potential meaning. And we also then get a bonus saying at the end about scribes being trained for the kingdom of heaven, which also, I think, functions to get our minds moving in new ways. And that's where I want to dive in first. For Jesus, after this whole succession of parables, asked his disciples, have you understood all this? And they respond most assuredly, oh, yes, we've got it. Yeah, right. I imagine Jesus must have had at least a wry smile and an upturned eyebrow if he didn't just laugh outright. Really? He then responds with this cryptic saying about how every scribe trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a householder who brings out from his treasure what is new and what is old. Now, the scribes were the keepers of the Jewish tradition. And maybe the reference to the new and old is about how they interpret the treasure of that tradition for their time and place. Is Jesus perhaps communicating that all who he teaches God's kingdom's ways to should then apply them to new situations and issues as they arise? Or maybe this is just Jesus' way of telling his disciples not to be so sure that they fully understand all his parables. Is it the wind, the flag, or the mind that is moving? Let me share with you some of my own ponderings as to what these parables might teach us about the reign of God, this kingdom of heaven. I know that there's probably much that I miss in them that you might be able to see. So don't stop pondering them once this sermon is over. They can continually help us to see more clearly how to live our lives under God's reign. I'm struck first by how many of them convey a universality to God's kingdom. It's the whole field or all the different types of soil. It's the whole batch of flour or the whole sea and everything in it. The kingdom of heaven, it seems to encompass everything and can be found in the most common and even surprising things. We can tend to plants, but we can't make them grow. And the mustard seed makes this point. It grows into a bush for birds to nest in. But mustard's also an invasive weed in Israel. Why would one sow it in the first place? It grows everywhere, especially where it's not wanted. It's a surprising metaphor for God's kingdom. It might prompt us to go looking for the kingdom in places where we least expect to find it. The leaven mixed in with the flour expands the dough. But our English NRSV translation misses what I think is an important point in this parable. Some other English translations stay true to the Greek text. And even, well, the updated NRSV at least puts a footnote in. The woman didn't just mix the leaven in the dough. It says she hid it. There's something unseen and hidden about how the kingdom of heaven takes shape in the world. And there's also another surprise. 3 measures of flour would produce 80 or 100 pounds of dough. Once baked, would feed not just a family, but the whole village. There's an abundance in God's kingdom. These first 2 parables also challenge our questioning about when and where the kingdom of heaven comes. The when is in its own good time, as long as it takes for the seed to sprout and grow or for the dough to rise. The where is how it's already present in the everyday things around us. The next 2 parables, the treasure in the field and the pearl of great price, share something in common. Someone is willing to sell all that they have in order to obtain what is desired. How might these parables inflame our passion for living under God's reign? Are we willing to give our whole selves away to obtain the treasure of life lived under God's reign and love? There's also here a notion of searching for something hidden and also finding an unexpected treasure. And the 5th parable that we had today about the net being thrown into the sea also highlights that universality of the kingdom. Now, English translators, again, have inserted fish into the narrative, but in actuality in the Greek, there's no fish. It's just this seine or dragnet gathers up everything in the sea, not just the fish. The kingdom of heaven gathers us all in. And also, again, like last week with the weeds and the wheat, in this parable, the angels come to do the sorting between the good and the bad. Once again, the evil ones are tossed into a furnace of fire where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So there is a note of judgment in this parable. But just like last week, we're not the ones to do the judging between the good and the evil. This parable can help us to glimpse the kingdom of heaven whenever wrongs are righted, whenever there are moments of reconciliation, renewal, and restoration. I glimpsed the kingdom of heaven in a story that Brian Stevenson tells. Brian is that lawyer featured in the movie Just Mercy, which is also based on the book of the same name that he wrote about releasing innocent prisoners from death row. Brian's also the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative that seeks to help our whole society face the truth of our nation's history of slavery and its aftermath of lynching and incarceration. Some of you might even remember the online gathering we hosted a couple of years ago with the Montgomery Travelers, sharing their experience of visiting the Legacy Museum that Brian founded in Montgomery, Alabama. That museum traces our nation's history from enslavement to mass incarceration. And one of the projects for the museum as it was getting established, was to send out volunteers to actual sites of lynchings to collect soil to be displayed in the museum. One day, an older Black woman came to participate. She was a bit flustered because her sister was supposed to come with her but didn't show up. So she mustered up her courage, took the jar with the man's name, a digging implement, and the paper with details about this particular lynching, and headed off to her by herself into West Alabama to find the site. It was on a backcountry dirt road, and so she parked her car, got down on her knees on the side of the road, and started digging. It wasn't long before she noticed this truck go by very slowly, and a white man inside staring out at her. She noticed that the truck stopped about 100 yards up the road, turned around, and came back again. And then the truck stopped, and this big white guy got out, came over to her, and asked, "What are you doing?" Now, in the instructions that they have been given, they said if someone comes and asks what they're doing, they could just say, "Well, we're gathering dirt for our garden." She thought about saying that, but a stream of courage arose inside her, and she said, "A man was lynched here in 1937, and I'm gathering soil to honor his memory." The man then asked if the paper that she had there told about the lynching. She said yes. He asked if he could read it. So she handed it to him. And after he read it, he said something that shocked her. He asked if it might be all right if he helped her. She said, well, sure. And so he knelt down there next to her, and she started to hand him the trowel that she had, but he said, no, you use that. I'll dig with my fingers. And then he began to dig with his fingers into the soil, lifting it up and putting it in the jar over and over again, scooping it with strong determination. After a minute or so, tears began to form in the woman's eyes, and he stopped and said, well, I'm sorry if I'm upsetting you. But she said, no, you're blessing me. They went back to digging for a while, and then the woman noticed that the man's body was convulsing, and tears were even running down his face. She put her arms on his shoulder and asked, are you all right? He said, no, I'm not all right. I wonder if my grandfather had been involved in this lynching. They finished filling the jar, and then the man asked if he could take a picture of her holding the jar. And she wanted a picture of him holding the jar too. She then invited him to follow her back to the Memorial Museum to see where the jar would be placed. And he did. I believe that those two that day experienced how the kingdom of heaven is like angels sorting the good from the bad. Where have you glimpsed the kingdom of heaven peeking through in the everyday realities of your life? It happens whenever and wherever there is restoration and reconciliation, in gestures of generosity and acts of love. It happens whenever and wherever wrongs are righted. It happens whenever our hearts and minds are moved to live in God's surprising ways of compassion, justice, and love. This stretch of parables also reveal how God's kingdom contains a mysterious quality. There's a hiddenness. It's like leaven hidden in the dough or a treasure hidden in a field. There's a mystery in how a little seed can grow into a large shrub that provides shade for birds. The mystery itself is like a great treasure or a pearl of great price. Once a person begins to sense deep in their soul that life lived under God's benevolent reign, what it's truly like, and living within that mystery, a driving passion begins to grow. That person becomes willing to sell all that they have to obtain it. They're willing to give their whole life to live it. My prayer today is that these parables might continue to move our hearts and minds. If we continue to ponder them, they will continue to change us. They will help us to see anew the extraordinary mystery of God's all-inclusive kingdom of heaven, both around and within us. So may that treasure that is both old and new restore us in right relationship to God, to ourselves, and to others. May our minds continually be moved to see more clearly what the kingdom of heaven is like. And when our minds are so moved, our hearts are sure to follow. Amen.